off again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true.
Good afternoon, welcome along to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. Delighted as always on a Tuesday to welcome Ross Gregory from Reach PLC, the Evening Chronicle. How are you, Ross?
I'm good, thanks, Steve. Good, thanks.
Good to see you, mate. As always, we've got an hour to chat about Newcastle United and go through some of the articles that are hitting the readers of the Evening Chronicle. And let's start off. I'll stick the links in the chat as we talk in case you haven't seen if you haven't seen the articles. Let's talk about the hot topic, I guess, which is Harvey Barnes. Newcastle, of course, have had a couple of players who've been go-to transfer potentials in recent windows. We obviously had the Maddison scenario, which went on for 3 windows. We then had Szoboszlai, which took as long as it did for me to get the pronunciation of his name correct before that was hijacked, if you like, by Liverpool, if you believe some journalists at Newcastle were interested in him. And now we've got Harvey Barnes, another Leicester player, a Leicester player who would be probably a like-for-like replacement maybe for an outgoing player. A lot of people suggesting ASM could be a make-way in that. Today in the Chronicle, though, we're a lot of mileage being put towards the fact that West Ham have got some money to spend. They've sold Declan Rice to Arsenal for 105 million, and Lee Ryder going quite big on this story in the Chronicle that that could be our competition if Newcastle are indeed interested in Barnes.
Yeah, look, I think Harvey Barnes. It's well known that Newcastle are really interested in him. They've got a long-standing interest in him. Had a fantastic season for Leicester last season in a team that was relegated. He's bounced back from injury issues and he's very, very highly regarded, very highly rated. Scored, I think double figures in terms of goals and on top of a number of assists last season. So when a player of his caliber and his form comes available, and with Leicester obviously being relegated, then they do need to look to sell, as they did with James Maddison. And when someone of Harvey Barnes' quality and caliber becomes available, you have to understand, you have to appreciate that there's going to be more than just one team. It's very rare that you just get a free run at these types of players. And it was the same obviously with James Maddison. And we said this all along with Maddison, was that England international at the peak of his powers, at the top of his game, Newcastle weren't going to just get a free run at it. There was going to be other clubs that were interested, and that's ultimately how it panned out. And Spurs pipped Newcastle to the signature of James Maddison. So Harvey Barnes is an exciting player, real talent, and there's going to be a number of clubs who will be interested in him. West Ham are certainly one of those, and they've got, as Lee says in his piece, when that money from Declan Rice transfer drops, then they're going to have serious spending power at West Ham, and it's a good fit for them. Harvey Barnes, he's that type of player that would fit in, I think, well at West Ham, and they're obviously ambitious and want to strengthen their squad. I wouldn't rule out Aston Villa yet, neither. I think Aston Villa has certainly got a watching interest in Harvey Barnes as well. People I speak to in the Midlands have certainly said that Barnes is on Villa's radar as well, and it's Leicester are obviously close geographically to Villa. Villa can offer European football as well. For Harvey Barnes, if that's a decision that he wants to make as well. So there's a number of clubs that are interested. For Newcastle, it seems that, look, I think when we've said this all along, that they would look to bring in another attacking player. They would look to bring in somebody with a bit of flair and somebody who can improve them even more at that top end of the pitch. Whether they can agree a fee for someone like Harvey Barnes, Leicester are talking about potentially upwards to 60 million that they want for Barnes, and I don't think Newcastle would be prepared to go that far. Certainly not without a little bit of negotiation, or without potentially having to sell somebody like ASM. I think Newcastle, it's a bit of a waiting game. But as the negotiations happen and potentially, they try to get the best deal possible, there is always the chance that somebody will just come in, whack the money down, make less of an offer that they can't refuse. And that could be West Ham or like I say, it could be Villa as well.
Yeah, a couple of clubs with money to burn, so it will be interesting to see what happens. We'll follow that one closely, of course, on NUFC matters, and just keep our fingers crossed that Newcastle can, be the team that gets into St James's Park. I think it'd be a good addition, certainly. Okay, following on with the Chronicles stories, I've just stuck another link in the chat. This one is Kieran Trippier. Of course, we know that Trippier's had not much of a break, not much of a rest, had a little bit of family time. For those of you who follow him on social media will have seen that. I think what we really want to pay tribute to, I guess, is we know how good a guy this is on the pitch as a captain, but off the pitch, he has proved this time and time again, Ross. Who can forget when he was on crutches, in his first spell at Newcastle? He was on the sidelines shouting and bawling like Eddie Howe, trying to rally the troops in the Great Escape season. But now, back early, could have had an extended break, and Sandro Tonali arrives at the club, and not only do we see Eddie Howe there welcoming him, and Darren Eales, Kieran Trippier's there, coming in, having a chat with him, talking to him about what it's like to settle into the area. It's a great club, it's a great squad, great team. You need to, your wife needs to settle if she's happy. It was just great to see on that 12-minute footage that the club released. But I mean, this guy really is words fail me at times. I can't remember a captain as good, and I know our social media team and are on the ball these days, and we see probably more than we ever did. But I just get the feeling he goes a cut above Ross, and Aaron Stokes has covered it in this article.
Yeah, I think you're right, Steve. I think look, when you bring players into a club, you look for various different qualities and elements to their personalities. You look for people first and foremost who can deliver on the pitch, who can improve the starting 11, who can improve the squad, who can make real contributions to the team. And I think a lot of people thought at the time, and have been proven right, that the Kieran Trippier signing was probably, it'll probably go down, when we look back on this era at Newcastle, and we look back on it in whatever it is, 5, 10, 15, 20 years time. I think we look back at the Kieran Trippier signing as being a real catalyst for Newcastle's resurgence, for their improvement, a real key signing. Yes, there'll be more eye-catching signings made, certainly as the club continues to develop. There'll be bigger signings in terms of money and finance, but will there have been a bigger signing, a better signing in terms of pure influence? I kind of look at it similar to when Newcastle under Kevin Keegan, and I know I always go back to the Keegan era, but I think it's a good reference point. Is when Keegan brought in Barry Venison, very similar sort of player who played at a real top level, fullback, but somebody with in the later stages of his career, but had a real leadership quality about him on the pitch and off the pitch. And I think Kieran Trippier is very, very similar. So not only does he deliver on the pitch with his performances defensively and in an attacking sense, not only does he deliver on the pitch with his leadership, but you need good characters around your dressing room. You need good characters, and I know we're probably going to talk later on about people like Paul Dummett and Loris Karius who've signed new contracts. You need people that you trust in the changing rooms, that can lead a changing room, that can knit a dressing room together. Especially when you've got players coming in from all different parts of the world, all different cultures, all different backgrounds. Kieran Trippier himself has gone abroad and played in Spain and played at Atletico Madrid, and being that new boy in the change rooms in a foreign country, with alongside people that he doesn't know, that he hasn't played with before or knows personally. And so he can see when somebody like Sandro Tonali comes in that, yeah, he's going to be a little bit daunted. He's going to be a little bit not a fish out of water, but he's going to need somebody to put their arm around him and show him, you know, what it means to play for this club, what the best areas are to settle in, you know, making sure that your family and everything and all that is sorted as well. Because, like I said, Kieran Trippier, when he was in Spain, he had the same issues. You know, he had you know, issues with family settling and different things like that as well. So he's speaking from experience, and I think that's another reason why he's absolutely perfect for this stage of Newcastle's development, this stage of their journey, if you like. You know, when they're bringing in different players, you need those senior pros who can guide the younger players as they come in.
Yeah, it just blows me away that the amount of effort that he goes to, and that's what, you know, makes the difference, and especially for a foreign player coming in, and just hearing him talk about his own experiences to Tonali via the translator and via, you know, his direct family there, that you know, they played against each other, of course. He said this was the guy who used to run past us, but also just talking about settling in and how he, you know, found it difficult, and how, you know, it was great, because that just shows you the level of, you know, the level that they're going to at the club at the moment. And yeah, it you know, on the pitch and in the dressing room, Newcastle United are getting it right 100%, which is fantastic. Okay, next story that I picked out of the Chronicle is this one, and it's Anthony Gordon, of course, had a wonderful tournament. And from his perspective, you know, crowned, you know, by getting the Player of the Tournament award. And I think what struck me, I said this a couple of days ago on this platform, that what really impressed me was that he interviewed on the pitch by, I think it was the official England channel, about picking up the award. And he went, this award's not about me. This award's about the team. It's about these guys. This is a great team to play in. It's been a great tournament, but this award isn't for me. It's for these guys. And I thought, wow, you know, we hear snapshots. A lot of people, we discussed, you know, the little bit of petulance we saw from him last season when he was substituted for that particular reason. We discussed it on this show. I think we saw what Anthony Gordon's all about in that tournament, and I think Newcastle will reap the benefits this season. But the article, of course, you know, in the Chronicle, saying, you know, that he adapted well to the new position. Sean McCormack talking about the fact that a lot of people were scratching their heads when, you know, they saw you know, the position he was going to be used in, but he rose to the occasion and proved that, you know, he's Mr. Versatility at Newcastle at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, Anthony Gordon, again, you know, you look at the way Newcastle's transfer business has been conducted over previous windows. They've had key targets in mind. They've had clear targets in terms of who they want and who they like, and they've been patient, and they've very rarely deviated from that. Sometimes they've had to wait maybe a little bit longer than what they would have wanted to bring these players in. But Anthony Gordon was someone that's been identified certainly by Eddie Howe, you know, for a long time, and didn't get him initially when was the interest there, but was patient and managed to bring him in January. And look, let's be honest about it. The money that Newcastle paid for Anthony Gordon, and the, you know, he wasn't necessarily in the best form of his time at Everton. They'd had a few people questioning, had a few people scratching their heads, thinking, is this the right player for Newcastle at this particular time? You know, that's not you know, try to rewrite history. There was definitely that element of the fan base who weren't sure about the signing. But you've got to give people like Eddie Howe and the scouting team the kind of the patience of they know what they're after, they know what they're like, and they've done the research on players. I think for Anthony Gordon, it was a difficult kind of 6 months at Newcastle. Had his injury issues, had to wait for his kind of a starting berth in order to get a good run in the team. There was obviously the cup situation where he was cup tied and missed out on games there, and it was probably a little bit frustrating for him. But he's certainly got quality, he's certainly got pace, and like you say, Steve, there's the versatility there. He can play off the right, he can play off the left, he can play as that kind of number 10 role as well. And he's shown obviously in the Euros tournament that he can play through the middle, and that's a position that he's also played for Everton. Don't forget, he has played that role for Everton in the past, certainly when they were struggling for strikers and with Dominic Calvert-Lewin's injuries and everything else like that, he was pressed into that kind of role. So it's not completely alien to him. Whether it's something that he can do week in, week out in the Premier League, I don't know. And whether it's a role that Newcastle will see him as being able or wanting to play, I don't know. I still think they'll probably look at him as a wide player. But what this tournament should give him is confidence and fitness and momentum to take back into pre-season when he comes in, and hopefully he can carry all that forward, all that kind of positive vibes that he's got, winning the player of the tournament, winning the tournament itself, scoring goals, playing a key role, assists, fitness, momentum, everything else like that. He brings that into Newcastle and hits the ground running, because if he does, then he could be in for a fantastic season, both personally and from a team perspective as well. So I think it's an exciting time for him, and I'm really pleased for him. I thought there were some great performances by the England youngsters. He was one of the standouts without a shadow of a doubt. There was some other great performances defensively. They looked really strong, and they look like there's some really obviously top talent in that team, and in that squad that you would be interested to see how they break through into the Premier League, some of them. But for Anthony Gordon, he's already got Premier League experience. He's already played at a good level. He's moved for a high figure, a big price, and now it's up to him to deliver at St James's Park.
Anthony Gordon is still a young lad. He'll learn from many leaders and characters we have at Newcastle, says Andy. Good afternoon, mate. Hope you're well. Getting a few questions in. I will come to them probably in the second half. Just want to just go through a couple more articles that we've handpicked from the Chronicle. And another one from Sean McCormick, just about RB Salzburg forward Noah Okafor, who claimed that he was the subject of a €38 million transfer bid from Newcastle last summer, but the Austrian champions didn't make him aware of the offer. Interesting, that one, isn't it? Because obviously Newcastle did get a forward in, Alexander Isak, who Newcastle, of course, now wouldn't be without, but also chased, as the article points out, a long drawn-out pursuit of Watford forward João Pedro and Reims striker Hugo Ekitike. So, yeah, just another name in the mix, one which not many people picked out, if any at all, it has to be said.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting piece, that one, and he's commenting on a podcast, I think, over in his hometown. So again, not a name that's necessarily been bandied around too much for interest in Newcastle, but that's transfers for you. And again, I've said this on this show before. Newcastle, when they go in for a player, they won't just have one target. They'll have a preferred target. They'll have a number one target, number one choice. But the nature of transfers is that there's so many moving parts. It's so difficult to actually get signed, sealed, and delivered. To quote a phrase, get them over the line, as one former manager used to constantly say. It's very, very difficult. So a deal, you never want to put all your eggs in one basket when it comes to transfers. So if Newcastle are looking for a striker, they'll have their first choice, they'll have the second choice, but they'll also have another 3, 4, 5 potential choices on that list, just in case they can't get the one that they want. If they can't get the number one choice, then they might go down that list, or they might decide, as they have done in the past with people like Sven Botman and Anthony Gordon, to be patient and to go back into different windows and revisit the deals there. So yeah, look, this lad is obviously somebody that they've had a look at and scouted at, but there was so many players that Newcastle will have an interest in because of just the nature of transfers. You've got to do your due diligence. You've got to do your homework. You can't put all your eggs into the one basket, and that'll be the case with this transfer window as well. If they're looking for a centre half, that's why you see so many names that are constantly linked, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's just idle speculation or that it's completely fabricated or a load of rubbish. There will be interest in so many players. The level of interest is debatable. That's the area you look at, and how far people are up on that hit list, if you want. But that's just the nature of this time of year. You've got to have a number of potential targets in case something happens to one. If Newcastle can't get Harvey Barnes, then they've got to move on to someone else. If they can't get, whoever it is, couldn't get James Maddison, do they move on and look at another option? So, you don't just go, we couldn't get him, never mind, we'll just go with what we've got. You've got to have another couple of backups, and that's certainly the case with some of these names that you'll be seeing linked with Newcastle over this summer.
Yeah, a few raised eyebrows as well when there was offers to the likes of Matt Ritchie, Paul Dummett, Loris Karius, question marks over where he was going, but raised eyebrows as to players getting offered 1-year extensions. Well, Paul Dummett signed on the dotted line this week, as did Loris Karius, who is staying with Newcastle United for another year, albeit at the... didn't take the advice of his girlfriend, according to Aaron Stokes' article in the Chronicle. She felt that he could probably go to any European club. Probably somewhere a little bit closer to her as well, I think. But he is, of course, his partner is Italian sports presenter Diletta Leotta, and she thought he could move to one of Europe's top leagues this summer, because it would be more beneficial to have the 30-year-old closer to her in Italy. But he clearly likes what he's seen in the dressing room. Of course, he could have been a strange situation. He could have been a person who'd come in as goalkeeper, not played a single league game, but played in a cup final. I mean, it would have been a great question of sport. But yeah, I mean, people can look at the article. I've stuck it in the chat there. But just your views on the two of them signing those 1-year extensions, Ross.
Yeah, I think it's just common sense with them both, Steve. I think it's real common sense. Newcastle, Nick Pope's the number one. They need backup to Nick Pope. Carl Darlow is obviously going to leave the club this summer, I think. Who's an option, but is way down the pecking order and isn't I don't think is Premier League standard. So they need somebody who's I'm not saying happy to be a backup. I'm not saying any keeper or anybody is happy to be a number two or be a reserve or not be in that first team. But I think Karius is at that point of his career where he's trying to build his career back up. I think as a number two, and I'm assuming here that Martin Dubravka will probably leave the club as well this summer in some way, shape, or form, and Karius will be the kind of the number two. I think to have someone of his experience isn't the worst option. I think it's a solid signing levels. That you're not having to pay a fee out. You can get him, for relatively good money, I'm assuming, and it means that they can potentially bring in a little bit of money by selling Darlow and Dubravka. I think. Whether it's something that's it's a short-term measure, whether it's something that's going to be long-term, and he could have probably moved elsewhere, but you look at Newcastle at the minute, and it's the same with Paul Dummett. Paul Dummett could have gone elsewhere and got been a regular starter in another club and got a lot more game time. But if you're Paul Dummett and you're a Newcastle lad, you're Geordie born and bred, you've had your full career. Why would you want to leave right now when Newcastle are on the up, playing in the Champions League? The so much excitement, so much buzz around the club. You want to stay. You'd be absolutely mad to walk away when you've slogged your guts out during the really difficult, dark times. Why would when the light's shining on Newcastle, when it's all positive, why would you then move away? I suppose the question with Paul Dummett was always, I think he would always have stayed, but would he have been offered a new deal? Well, we know the situation with English qualified players in the Champions League squad and everything else like that comes with it, and you need a quarter of homegrown players. It made sense for Newcastle to offer a contract to Paul Dummett, someone who's come through academy and ticks a certain number of boxes. I'm not saying that's the only reason that he's been offered a contract. It's not a tick box exercise. He's obviously somebody that Eddie Howe values around the squad. And it goes back to what we said at the start about Kieran Trippier and other personalities around the club, Matt Ritchie and Jamal Lascelles and every other one. It's not just about what you do on the pitch. It's about what happens off the pitch. It's about the impact that you can make around the club, in the changing rooms, around the training ground, in the community. It's not just about, Saturday 3 o'clock or Sunday 4 o'clock or whatever time the kickoff is for 90 minutes. There's more to it to being a professional footballer at a club than that. And I think Newcastle and Eddie Howe and the coaching staff value someone like Paul Dummett's experience and input and what he brings to the club as a whole, as well as still obviously being a great player. You know, he's still a Premier League player who's more than capable of doing the job for Newcastle. So yeah, I thought both contract situations, both contract extensions made real sense. Wasn't surprised by either of them. You know, 12-month extensions, 12-month deals. Well, you know, the club will reassess in 12 months' time and see where they are there. But yeah, best of luck to both players, because I think they deserve them 12 months.
Gary just says, do you think the Dummett's extension is done because they're not going to sign a left back? Somebody else makes the point as well that, you know, potentially, you know, well, Andy says he's been a great servant of the club. Apparently he's great with the lads in the dressing room too. But he is good cover, says Chicken Orient, for centre back and left back. I mean, there'll be a bit of that in it. There'll be a little bit of that. The fact that he's versatile. Also that he's good in the dressing room, Ross, with you know, he's a local lad as well, which is going to count heavily towards part of, you know, the Champions League, the squad as well. I mean, there's lots of different things and lots of different reasons, but, you know, I think ultimately as well, you know, he can still play. If he couldn't play, they wouldn't be offering him that 1-year extension. No,
absolutely. I think there's a culmination of things, Steve. I think it's not just one reason. I think you're right, and you know, the comments that everybody's made in the chat there are right as well. You know, he's more than capable of covering at left back, potentially as a left-sided centre half. He ticks the box when it comes to the academy development for Champions League squads and being homegrown. He's great in the change rooms and around the community. He's a local lad that he gets the club, and when you're bringing in young players who might need a little bit of time to bed in, he's somebody like a Kieran Trippier who can advise them on the area, on settling in, all that sort of stuff. So it ticks a lot of boxes and just makes real sense to me. I don't think that it necessarily means that Newcastle then won't bring in another left back, because I do still think that's an area that they will look to strengthen this summer. You know, you'd expect 2 or 3 players to still be moving out, and you know, so Jamal Lewis will probably be one who will be looking for another club in this summer transfer window. You've still got Dan Burn and Paul Dummett who can play at left back, and Matt Targett as well. So they are well stocked there, but they're stocked in terms of numbers. But I do think that, again, we've said this before. I've said this before. If you're looking for that 2, 3, or 4 or 5% that you can improve the squad, I do think they might look at bringing in another left back, regardless of Paul Dummett's contract situation.
Yeah, okay. As always, we are halfway through the show. It is time for the ads.
A big thanks to all our sponsors: Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website skipsandbins.com, easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's sauces, which are handmade in Cumbria. Their website is mrvickies.co.uk. If you want to contact the guys, email info@mrvickies.co.uk or telephone 01768 210 102. Big thanks to New Workwear. They are an agile and dedicated workwear provider launched in 2018. For more information, go to their website, newworkwear.com. Big thanks, as always, to Media Arts for the help with the video side of things. If you want to support the channel, hit the subscribe button, become a subscriber today. Hit the thumb up under the video, which likes the video, and click share to share to your other social media. Click join if you want to become a member of the channel for as little as $1.99, or take a one-off payment for the cult membership. You can get in via this QR code if you've got a smartphone, or look for membership pack on the website, nufcmatters.com. What do you get for your one-off £25 payment? You get a scarf, a pen, and a cup, and a membership card, and entry into the monthly draw. Don't forget, if you want a car sticker, all you need to do is subscribe to the show and then email John at NUFC Matters, and he will post you a free car sticker out. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast providers. And we also support the food bank on this channel. NUFCfansfoodbank.co.uk is the virtual matchday bucket where you can make a virtual donation 365 days of the year. The new Alan Shearer raffle is underway. 150 tickets at £1 a ticket. You could win a limited edition signed Alan Shearer ball from the 260 dinner. Enter now at nufcmatters.com. We've got a few events coming up. August the 5th sees Gavin Peacock at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets are £10 and you can get them now from nufcmatters.com. Our Christmas event takes place on the 7th of December at the Tyneside Irish Centre, and that's an evening with Frank Clark. Tickets are £15 and available from nufcmatters.com. Finally, Waddle, Keegan, Beardsley and friends. The class of 84 is on at the Tyne Theatre and Opera House on Westgate Road in Newcastle on Thursday, January the 23rd. Tickets are now available from the Tyne Theatre and Opera House.co.uk or telephone 0844 2491 000. That's the box office telephone number 0844 2491 000.
Okay, second half of the show. Let's come to a few of your questions. JB says, do you regard Elliot Anderson as a midfielder or a wide attacker?
For me, he's a attacking midfielder. He's a midfielder. I think that would be where he ends up playing, long term. For now, he's still part of he's still developing as a footballer. He's still developing as a Premier League player. So maybe times where he's used as a wide forward as opposed to a kind of attacking midfielder. It's they're very different roles, and to be a midfielder and certainly in Eddie Howe's team, you need to be both physically ready but tactically and mentally switched on as well, and being able to to understand the positional play and stuff like that. So I do think he'll end up as an attacking midfielder, whether it's a 10 or an 8.
Oh, Ross, we've lost. It's okay, Ross. We've got your back, mate. You froze again, but we've got your back, mate. Go on, just continue what you were saying there, mate. Sorry.
Yeah, I think he'll be used in both positions by Eddie Howe as he continues his development. Ultimately, I think he'll end up as an attacking midfielder, but we'll certainly see him in wide forward positions as well.
Okay, I hope that answers your question. Senshi Bat, good afternoon, says, is Axel Desai still a good centre-backs option? It's another link. Do you think that's a good option for Newcastle? I mean, that's the Monaco player, isn't it? The Monaco centre-back.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't know really anything about him.
I don't know a great deal about him either. I've said that on the show. I mean, I've looked into him, but I can't say whether he'd be a good option for Newcastle. I've got to be perfectly honest, Ross.
No, I mean, look, the need in the want to bring in centre half, add more competition into that area, more quality into that area. I think we've, Fabian Schär's had a fantastic season, absolutely fantastic season, and has been another one who's been a great servant to the club. But he's 33 now, and I think Newcastle will look again. You're looking at where can they improve that starting 11? Can they bring in somebody who's better than Fabian Schär? So I do think that it's an area that they'll absolutely look to strengthen is the centre back positions. But I don't know anything about this lad, so I whether he's better than what they've got or capable of stepping into the Premier League, I wouldn't be able to comment, to be honest.
Okay, some name this. I'm going to call you Rana, so please excuse me. I'm not even going to attempt first name. Do we really have to sell Alan St. Maximin by Harvey Barnes?
I think, look, do they have to? Possibly not. But you can't just keep buying players. It doesn't work from a financial sense. It doesn't work from an FFP sense. And it doesn't work from a squad size sense either. So you can't.
There's a list of players, actually. Sorry to interrupt you, Ross. There's a list of players. Yeah. If you take Joe Linton out, the rest of those players were bought under this ownership. So, I mean, that tells you Newcastle's owners have come in and they have invested. They've invested wisely, it has to be said. But like Darren Eales has said, and others at the club, it's not sustainable. You can't go on like that. And you were just about to say the same.
Yeah, you can't. People seem to think that FFP is a myth. Some people seem to think that it doesn't exist, that it's it's a load of nonsense, this, that, the other. It's not. It's absolutely true. You can't keep spending and spending and spending. Chelsea spent a lot of money, but look how much money Chelsea have made back this summer already. You know, they've sold, the amount of players that they've sold, you know, whether it's Mason Mount or Kai Havertz or whoever it is, you know, they've probably brought in about £200 million already this summer, Chelsea. You know, they've brought in huge amounts because they sell players on. They bring players in, yes, for big money, but they also sell players for big money. Newcastle just can't keep buying players without, you know, recouping some money elsewhere. And unfortunately, at the minute, you know, or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, I suppose, but they don't have many, you know, saleable assets within that kind of fringe part of the squad. And our class, SM, has been, he's not a guaranteed first team starter like a Bruno or an Isak or a Trippier or a Botman. He's on the fringes, and I think you could get decent money from you. And ultimately, you can't just keep adding players to your squad as well. If you want to bring in Harvey Barnes, then all of a sudden you've got Harvey Barnes, Anthony Gordon, Miguel Almiron, Jacob Murphy, you know, Elliot Anderson, Alexander Isak, Callum Wilson. You know, how many striking options, how many forward options do you want there? So you've got to ultimately start to sell some players. You've got to bring in some money to balance the books, to make yourself to be able to then reinvest, to go again and bring some more players in. So for me, there's only two real players who are kind of saleable assets in that sense. Miguel Almiron, absolutely there from, you know, and I agree with the comment there from My Like Coffee. I think, you know, Miguel Almiron, you could get some decent money for him, and you could get decent money for ASM, and I think one of them probably has to go.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of months still in this transfer window. I think there's plenty twists and turns at Newcastle United, ins and outs. We'll wait and see. Lots of people want to know, you know, about the outs. I guess one suggestion in one newspaper suggested that Botman was being linked with Man City. Ryan Yates is asking, do you think this is just a bit of brinksmanship to get Gvardiol over the line? I would say yes, because Botman won't be leaving Newcastle anytime soon.
No, I don't think he'd be leaving anytime soon, Steve. I agree, but I don't think we should be, you know, naive to think that there won't be some admiring glances cast in his direction from other clubs. You know, Newcastle were, you know, I'm not saying they took a punt on him, but they were patient and they plucked him out when there wasn't, you know, other than obviously Milan, there wasn't a great deal of competition for him. But he's proven that he's a quality operator in the Premier League. And that's what's going to happen for Newcastle. If your recruitment's really good and you bring players in and they're a success, then, you know, other clubs are going to be casting their glances. You know, clubs with more money or who can guarantee Champions League football week in, week out, season in, season out. Sorry, you know, like a Man City or a Barcelona or whoever. You know, so your Brunos, your Botmans, your Isaks, if they continue to play well, you know, other clubs are going to be interested. That's football.
Yeah, of course it is. Glenn, good afternoon. He says, any news on us signing a more experienced player, lads? I feel like we need a couple of players that won things to stop the stage fright if we get to another final. That's a great comment, Glenn. Great question. More experience, you know, is one thing, but there is a bit of experience in the squad when you look at it. Fabian Schär, he's the wrong side of 30. Kieran Trippier, you know, is experienced. You know, there are one or two, but I guess it's winners. And I think when I've done a lot of talk-ins over the years with the entertainers, a lot of people point to the fact that nobody in that dressing room, with the exception of Peter Beardsley, had actually won anything. And it does play a big part when you get onto that big stage.
No, I totally agree. I think if you look back at the cup final, at the League Cup final in February, end of February, the best player on the pitch for me was Casemiro. By head and shoulders, you know, by a country mile, he was the best player on the pitch. And look, this is a guy who's won, you know, multiple Champions Leagues, who's won titles wherever he's been, and he looked a class act. He looked, you know, not fazed by playing at Wembley in a cup final. And I'm not saying Newcastle players were fazed, but, you know, they'd never been there. The majority of them, they hadn't experienced that. So I think it's a really good shout. You know, but where are Newcastle at with their development? Is it in you know the profile of players that they're bringing in? Are they wanting to bring in players in their early to mid-20s, like your Botmans and your Brunos and your Anthony Gordons, and people who they can see as developing along with the club? Or is it in a position where they need to bring in a couple of older heads like a Casemiro? I think it's a really interesting point. I don't see Newcastle particularly doing that at the minute. If I'm being honest, I don't see them, going out and bringing in a Casemiro or whoever it might be, who's probably got 2 or 3 seasons left and no kind of real kind of resale value or anything else like that. I don't see that as being the model that they want to go down at this point in time. But in the future, who knows? It might be something that they need to consider.
Dave Bullman, good afternoon, says, would you go for Taylor Hardwood-Bellis from Man City? Only 1 year left on his contract. Talks of West Ham and Fulham, looking at £50 million deal. Looks excellent player and could be a good future partner for Bottenham. Again, not somebody who I am too up to date with on this guy. I'd need to look into him. You've just stuck the question in the chat, so certainly I'd like to do a little bit of research and see what he's like. But I always feel with centre halves, you'd be looking for somebody, maybe somebody with a bit more experience. I don't know. I think they'll be happy with what they've got for the moment. I certainly think if there was an injury to Botman or Shaw, then it is an area again where we do need to strengthen.
Yeah, and look, they'll definitely look at bringing a centre half. I don't think there's any doubt in that. Hardwood-Bellis is he's a real prospect. He looked excellent for England in the Euros there. I thought obviously captain them to the title, to the championship. I thought him and Levi Colwill in the centre defence looked really good. The two of them. I really like Colwill, by the way, the Chelsea lad who's obviously been out on loan at Brighton. I think he looks a real player. But Hardwood-Bellis was captain. He's obviously got leadership qualities. He's obviously he helped Burnley win the championship last season on loan from Man City, playing under. There's not many better defenders that you could play under as a manager than Vincent Kompany at Burnley, and I'm sure he picked up a few tricks and techniques off him. So he's obviously somebody that's got a real good future ahead of him, and kind of his profile's been lifted after the Euros, and maybe Anthony Gordon will put in a good word from when he's back, but yeah, it'd be interesting to watch his development and see if he's somebody who can kick on, because it's one thing doing it in the championship or in the under 21 stage. It's another thing then doing it week in, week out on the Premier League stage against your Haalands and your Salahs and people like that. So yeah, be an interesting one to keep an eye on him.
Geordie Toomba Life, good afternoon, says, can you see the owners buying out the players' contracts if no one wants to buy them? Of course, we have a couple of players. Tom Dixon mentions Ryan Fraser, for instance. Darlow, I think there'll be a deal done. A lot of interest in him. But Ryan Fraser's one. Jeff Hendricks was another. There's one or two other names who will be bandied around. But I can't see Newcastle doing that. I just don't see that happening.
No, I don't particularly. I think they'll try and work deals where even if these players go back out on loan and Newcastle are still paying a vast chunk of their wages, but they'll get some contribution in from the club that takes them on loan for your Ryan Frasers, your Jamal Lewis's, your Hendrick, your Isaac Hayden's, these sort of players. There's a lot of players there that Newcastle now need to get off the books, but getting them off the books is easier said than done. They'll all be on decent money, they'll all be on good wages. They won't want to take a drop, and nor should they. The club's committed to these contracts and they'll have to honour them. But I think their first choice will be to find them a loan club if they can't find them a permanent deal.
Okay, Andy, another question. He says, question for Ross and Steve. Now we've got Tonali, do you think he will be used as a defensive midfielder so that Bruno can get forward, or do you think Eddie Howe's going to mix it up?
Good question. It'd be interesting to see how those two dovetail together. I think it gives the option for Eddie Howe certainly to try Bruno a little bit further up the pitch. But I think look, Tonali is certainly a very capable defensive midfielder or a pivot in there. But the bits and pieces that I've seen of him, and I've spoken to people who've watched him a lot more than me, and they've said he's not just a destroyer. He's not just somebody who sits in defence. He can be a bit more progressive and get himself up the pitch and score goals. Very similar, I think, to what Bruno is. We've seen Bruno play in a number of different positions, and even when he is that kind of centre midfield, that defensive midfield, he's still popped up with goals. He's still weighed in with assists. He's still found himself in dangerous positions. So it'll be a real interesting part of kind of pre-season and the first few months of the campaign to see how them two dovetail together. I wouldn't be surprised if Tonali takes a little bit of time to adapt to the English game. I think we talked about it last week, Steve, on the show that it's sometimes Eddie Howe's shown that he's not just going to always throw somebody in from the off when they've come in. Sven Botman had to bide his time and be a little bit patient before he got a regular start. Bruno did when he came in. Alexander Isak did, albeit he was a little bit disrupted with injury. Same with Anthony Gordon. So I wouldn't. I think Tonali's obviously an excellent player with great pedigree, and he'll absolutely enhance that midfield. But it might just take him a little bit of time to bed in the first few months.
I like Coffee says, after Tonali, do you think we need more midfielders? If not, which other positions should we be prioritising now? And Tom Dixon was asking, do you still think a forward player is a priority for Newcastle in the ongoing window?
It's not. It wouldn't be a priority for me. A forward player. I think for priorities for me would be centre half and probably left back. But I think Newcastle do want another attacking player in if they can bring one in. In terms of the midfielders, then you've got Tonali and Bruno. You've got Sean Longstaff, Joe Willock, Joe Linton, who can play in there as well. So you've got 5, potentially 6 with Elliot Anderson. I think in an ideal world, I think they would like one more. But they probably like one more midfielder, another forward, another left back, another centre half. That there's potentially an extra 4 players. It depends on who's available. It depends on who's available at what price as well, because they can't just go out and spend 55-60 million on another 4 or 5 players. I just don't see that happening. I might be proven wrong. We might be sitting here on the 1st of September, and people in the comments will be laughing at us and saying, "Oh, look, there you go, Ross. We've just spent 300 million on another 4 players." And I'll hold my hands up, but I just don't see it happening. So I think they've got to prioritise. They've got to look at what deals that they can do. But I do think a centre half, a left back, potentially another midfielder, and a forward player where the priorities will be.
Okay, another question from Roger, and he says, do you think new contracts will be offered to Wilson or Share, or do you think they'll be allowed to leave at the end of next season?
It's a good question. I think I'd be surprised if Fabian Schär gets offered another contract, or he might get a 12-month contract. He is 33 now. He'll be 34 at the end of next season, I think. Are you going to be offering another contract to a 34-year-old, a long-term contract, especially if you've brought in another centre half this summer? Callum Wilson's an interesting one because he's another one who's alongside the 30, but he's just had a fantastic season, and it still looks like he's got a lot of life left in him. If he's obviously had his issues with injuries and that's taken its toll on him a little bit, but he still looks fit as a fiddle. He still looks like he could lead the line in the Premier League for another 2 or 3 seasons. I think it'll all depend on the recruitment over the next couple of months. Do they bring in another striker? Do they bring in another centre half? But I'd be surprised if Fabian Schär got offered another deal. That's just my personal opinion. Don't know anything more than that, but I think Callum Wilson probably deserves another contract.
Andy, you are so right. He says, I used to know our best midfield when everyone was fit, but with more additions, it's a great headache for Eddie Howe to have. Definitely is. With Bruno, Tonali and Big Joe, we've got a midfield that can go through the whole match. It is quite insane. And Chris, just reverting back to what we're talking about at the top of the programme, probably watched the documentary we've watched on YouTube about financial fair play, Chris. Main financial fair play argument when you say it's real is that seeing other clubs get away with breaching it and never getting any punishment. then why not just laugh it off? He says, aye, Chelsea made 200 million, but they spent 700. But the Man City documentary is fantastic. If you haven't watched it on YouTube yet, I recommend everybody watch it, because it certainly spells out in layman's terms why people are laughing at it. Manchester City charged with 115 counts and banned from Champions League football for 2 years, only to have the decision overturned and, kicking the can down the road. It's fantastic when you see the evidence as well, and you just wonder how on earth that could be allowed to happen. So, Chris, get where you're coming from on that, mate, 100%. Dave Bullman, we had that question. And we have got a couple of other things I wanted to point out in the Chronicle. One of them was about youngsters coming through, the youngsters. Tell us about that article, please, Ross.
Yeah, so we've it's just part of a little content series that we're doing across the Reach network. We're looking at some of the potential players that are going to be big over the next 6, 12, 18 months, trying to identify some of that new talent coming through, and a lot of them at Newcastle you'll probably be aware of. But we've just put a little series together, asking who are the best young talents coming through, and getting you to vote on which one you're most excited about seeing. So for Newcastle, we've got you've got Duran Qual in there, who's obviously had who came in and had that loan spell up at Hearts. Still a lot of excitement about him, and he's still only 18, and similar to him is Yankuba Minte, who went straight back out to Feyenoord, and we might not see him at Newcastle for 12 months, but he's obviously a young lad with great potential. A bit closer to home, you've then got Lewis Miley, who's probably the standout name. Made his Premier League debut in the last game of the season at Stamford Bridge and smacked the crossbar. Lad from Stanley, who's got a big future ahead of him. Hopefully, still only 17, and he's very, very highly thought of. And then we've got a couple of other names in there. So we've got Alex Murphy, who's a young centre half come through the academy, Irish defender, and you've got Joe White, who's been highly tipped and hasn't quite made that kind of breakthrough yet at the club. So a very technically gifted player, but yeah, it's just part of another content series. We wanted to do something a little bit different. You see these names linked or in pre-season squads, certainly when clubs go away away on tour and taking they're taking 25, 30 players with them, and you see these players getting little glimpses. Who would you like to see more of in pre-season? Is it would you like to see Lewis Miley have a real good run out in pre-season? Is there room for someone like a Joe White or Alex Murphy to come through at Newcastle? What about the young lads who've been out on loan? Is there any that you'd like to see given more game time, or any that you're particularly excited about? So yeah, we'll welcome your votes, welcome any comments that you want to make on these players. Some people have seen a lot of them playing for the 23s and the 18s. I know a lot of people go out and watch them. Some won't have seen so much of them. So it's just interesting. I think as journalists and as fans, I think we all want to see young talent coming through the academy and making an impact on the first team. There's nothing better than seeing young players that you've got an affinity with coming through, and whether that's you go back to your Lee Clarks and your Steve Watsons, or it's more present, it's your Sean Longstaffs and your Elliot Andersons. I think it always gives fans a bit of a buzz to see the next generation of talent coming through into the first team.
Another article I've just stuck in the chat is another one from Lee Ryder, just about Emil Krafth, who, of course, was pictured coming back into pre-season. He won't play a part in the club's pre-season fixtures, of course, because he is coming off the back of an ACL recovery. Those of you who will remember last season, he was badly injured in the Carabao Cup tie at Tranmere Rovers 11 months ago. He'd only just signed a new contract extension at the time as well. So light at the end of the tunnel for Krafth, and certainly one of Eddie Howe's favourites.
Yeah, but he's become a bit of a forgotten man, hasn't he, at Newcastle? And I think he was he was really unlucky because under Steve Bruce, if we're being honest, again, that's not rewriting history. He wasn't a fan favourite at all. He was somebody who who people questioned whether he was good enough to be at the club, whether he, what his best position was. Sometimes he struggled at right back, but sometimes he was played as a right-sided centre half, and he was just one of them players that you were never quite. I think a lot of fans were never quite convinced by. Under Eddie Howe, as a lot of players did, he just looked a different player. He looked fitter and fresher and more confident and comfortable in the role that he was being asked to play, and he looked like he had a potentially a good season ahead of him. Then suffered that really nasty injury at Tranmere, so he's become a bit of a forgotten man at the club, and he's not close still to a return. He's still got a lot of rehab to do, and I think Eddie Howe said that they'll probably not see him in pre-season, and so it might be a little while before we see him back. But wish him all the best. Coming back from a really difficult injury like that, especially in the I'm not saying he's an old player, but he's in the later stages of his career as opposed to someone like a Harrison Ashby or a Elliot Anderson who are young men. So it'll be we wish him all the best. Hope he gets back to full fitness and can prove to be another valuable asset for Eddie Howe's squad.
And of course, just before we finish, you are the top man at Wycombe. How is your pre-season going? Because pre-season preparations at the non-league start a little bit earlier. You can never switch off when you're involved at any level of football. Non-league is probably a little bit more stressful because you're doing virtually everything, Ross. How's it going with your pre-season at Wycombe?
Yeah, it's going all right. We've had 2 pre-season games played up at Wallington last Saturday, and then we had a game against Spennymoor. Spennymoor brought a really strong team down to the Glebe on Thursday gone. 2 really good run-outs. And we've got Chesley Street tonight, and then we'll probably have another 2 or 3 friendlies, I think, before our season starts on July the 29th. We start really early. So yeah, it's interesting. It's my first pre-season as chairman. Obviously, I've been around the club for a lot of years, but it's my first one as chairman, and trying to get your budget sorted, trying to get your squad sorted, trying to get kit organised, trying to arrange training and friendlies and everything else like that goes around it. Dealing with all the off-field stuff as much as the on-field stuff. It's certainly been stressful. I've probably worked harder on that than I do in my day job. Although you might have to bleep that out, Steve. Some of my bosses don't hear it. But it's certainly been stressful. It's been interesting. It's been interesting. The hard work never stops. We've got a few summer camps coming up now with juniors. We've got some really good coaches coming in with Matty Patterson and Charlotte Potts and people like that who are really good academy coaches. So we've got those, trying to reach out into the community a bit more and get the juniors involved a little bit more in the club. So it's going well, but it's I'm sure I wasn't quite this great when I first started off. Right?
Yeah, but so what's your next friendly up at Wycombe, just so people know and they can get up there to see it?
We don't have any more. We don't have any more this pre-season because obviously we share with the cricket club, so it's very difficult to get pre-season friendlies in. We managed to squeeze the Spennymoor one in, and then so we don't have any more. We've got a couple of games in August, which we're just trying to sort dates out with the cricket. We've got North Shields coming up at the start of August, and then we've got a FA Cup game, which we might have to put on the Sunday because the cricket's playing on a Saturday. So it could be a good day up at the Glebe on a Sunday afternoon, a Sunday session at the Glebe, watching the FA Cup. But yeah, it's so the rest of the pre-season games are all away. We've got South Shields Academy, we've got Heaven, we've got like I say, at Chesley Street tonight, and we've got one at Prutter as well. So busy, mate, busy. Great
stuff, mate. Well, I'm sure we'll keep up to date with Wycombe's progress as well on this show. But as always, thanks very much, Ross. Great day, great chat. Look forward to seeing you next week, mate. Take care, pal.
Cheers, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email john@nufcmatters.com to arrange today.